alweer iets nieuws. Humorjournalist Serge Simonard zocht Bowie op en had een lang gesprek met deze artistieke chameleon die vooral bezig is met muziek, maar ook met film en beeldende kunst. Beide heren hebben het gehad over werk, het leven, de liefde, noem maar op. En één ding komt duidelijk naar voren. David Bowie has no regrets.
I think it would have been fairly hard for me to control any element of my career because I wouldn't know what I was supposed to be controlling. So much of what I did was intuitive at the time and spontaneous reaction to circumstances. The impression of calculation was always applied to me because I was one of the few people in the popular music world who didn't believe in having to stick to what is perceived as genuineness. I didn't have particular respect for craft or virtuosity or some absolute, some set of rules that I would follow, and that I didn't really necessarily feel it was important to be the same person off stage as on stage. I had a problem with the idea of genuineness. I believe far too much in theatricality, artifice. I believed artifice was very important to art forms.
The Man Who Fell to Earth. Het zou een grafschrift voor David Bowie kunnen zijn, ware het niet dat Bowie met 50 vitaler is dan ooit en dat hij een...
Scared. Yeah, and one of yours, I hope.
Op artistiek vlak is Bowie een duiveldoe al. Film, muziek, beeldende kunsten, in alles zoekt hij naar het theatrale, naar een ontsnappingsroute uit de grijze wereld, naar een parallel universum van de kunst. Hij zelf omschrijft het als een nooit aflatende honger, net zoals een vampier steeds weer nieuw bloed nodig heeft om te overleven, of om eeuwig verder te leven.
Forever. Forever and ever.
For all those of you that have come and seen me for so many years, it's been a fantastic ride. Thank you very much. For those of you that have maybe just found my music, I don't know where I'm going from here, but I promise I won't bore you. Okay.
Like to take a cement fix, bigger standing cinema. Dress my friends up just for show, see them as they really are.
I think it's probably a misnomer to say that I actually knew Warhol because he was the nature of person that I think was a slow personality to incorporate other people into his circle.
Andy Warhol looks a scream, hang him on my wall. Andy Warhol, silver screen, can't tell them apart at all.
I met him on any number of occasions. I mean, in New York during the 70s and early 80s, it was impossible virtually to go anywhere without not seeing Warhol because he would go everywhere. If there was a new gallery opening, he'd be there. If somebody threw a party, he'd be there. If there was a new film, anything. he really sort of turned up a lot to everything. But I certainly got a very strong sense of him when on the occasions that we did meet. And for me, I always thought that he, as a personality, got a sort of an ambiguous, if not a kind of a fairly malicious press. I think they had him carved, they pinned him to be a malicious person himself, and some kind of Machiavellian, hard person, and I didn't find that at all.
Reminds me of some accusations vented at some rock star.
And we know how they're wrong. But I actually found him fairly insecure, a little kind of in awe of his own reputation. I found that he was the kind of person that didn't actually understand why he was taken so seriously or had become so much of an icon himself.
Andy Warhol looks a scream, hang him on my wall. Andy Warhol, silver screen, can't tell them apart at all.
Can I help you?
You want to buy some ignorant art? $10 a piece.
No, I think it's okay. Of course, Mr. Bishop.
Gee, ignorant art, Bruno. Yeah, you know, like stupid, like ridiculous, crummy art.
Wow, that sounds good. That's new.
$10.
Oh, gee, it didn't work very much on these. I can give you like 5. Come on, Bruno, you're rich. Maybe you should talk to Bruno.
You don't even work on your stuff.
No, it's not how much you work on something that matters. It's how much you get for them.
I can get 10.
These are great, Bruno. Maybe I'll take 2. I'll take, let me see these. I'll take this one and, I don't know. Bruno, can I borrow some money?
Yeah.
He almost had a little boy lost quality about him that I felt was possibly much nearer to the man than maybe the way he'd been construed in
moving.
You know, yeah, and that's if there was an element of him that I wanted to bring in, and he was actually very funny as well, and most of the time unwittingly, didn't kind of realise he was funny. Well, he was just very flip in his replies, but they weren't premeditated. He just said the first thing on his brain, and they were often just silly little remarks. He was kind of like a dizzy queen, you know, and I'm not sure that he was much more complicated than that. And that's the kind of element of him that I wanted to portray, you know, through my thing. I wanted the humanization of Warhol rather than this great monster of art, you know.
Dad home? Oh, hi, Jean. That's great, Frank. Can you, I don't know, whiz over here? More that way.
What's with the wigs?
Oh, I'm gonna give them to people for Christmas.
You think that's a good present? Who wants an old wig?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, piss painting.
Oh, piss painting, Jean. Oxidation art.
Yeah, I hate cleaning brushes too.
I'm gonna do some more of these. Frank's been drinking this great Mexican beer, and it makes it go this great green.
Why don't you paint on him yourself?
I don't like beer.
There's something connected to Warhol as well, and to the perception people
Oh, don't
have.
try and make a strong link between me and Warhol, Serge. I'll wring your bloody neck.
No,
every
it's
time.
just that the difference in perception
absolutely
between.
nothing similar between us whatsoever.
You're going to shoot me now.
No. I mean, everything.
just
our approaches are so different.
No, but the
he
thing
was
I-
very much a surface man. I'm very much an interior and multi-textured person. I layer things. I try and create polymorphous and poly-meanings to everything that I do. Whereas Warhol wanted one simple, direct construct. Our approaches to what we do, our relationships with people, the way that we were and are just so incredibly different. Things. Singularly as an individual, probably really didn't gather steam until someone like Turner in 1820. That kind of period, that's when you get the individual. It's a new concept, the artist. And so I think the many hundreds of years where it was merely a commercial concern, where an artist did a job and was paid for it, I mean, I think the hilarious thing, I think it should probably go back to that, is that once an artist he would charge by the amount of gold he used in his painting, or the amount of German blue. Well, you're going to have about 15 inches of German blue in this one, so you're going to, let's see, 15, 30, about 40 ducats, I'd say. And I think musicians could charge by the minute. I think, well, this piece would probably go about 7 minutes, so much a second.
20 pounds.
Yeah, yes.
Painter, you like something because he'll change it. do you find...
Yeah, that was a funny line, and I think that's probably true, yeah.
Do you find you have a sort of perverse...
Yes, yeah? Absolutely, yeah. And I think it's because you're sort of, you're a bit dissatisfied if something meets somebody else's expectations, and I think, well, that's not what I wanted. I wanted to, I'd rather confuse their expectations. So if somebody says, oh, I really like that, that's really good, you should do more of that. Right, I won't be doing more of that then.
Go to an auction and, for instance, I don't know, buy the paintbrush of Monet or whatever, and on the other hand...
I bought the palette to Stanley Spencer.
You did?
Yeah. This is. But by the way, I only bid to what I think the value is. I'm quite tight with my money in auctions. I don't go through the roof. Most of my best things that I've bought have been a very reasonable amount because nobody else knew what they were or recognised them.
Which is
I'm very immodest as a collector. I'm very good at what I collect.
But again, you're in the position also that your stuff is auctioned in rock memorabilia, etc. I've always wondered, I know it's a trivial thing, but how does it feel? I would hate, for instance, a writer whose letters are auctioned off. I'd get so angry.
I think well, the only thing that probably angers me is stuff that I know for a fact was stolen. It's sort of it's a consequence of being public property in a way. So it comes with the territory, and in one way, I kind of think, well, I don't have to do what I do. If I want, if I don't like being a public figure and all the shit that comes with it, I've got the option of leaving. So it's like it's no. You have to kind of expect it, You can't moan about it.
Zen attitude, like.
I don't know about that, but it's a. Yeah, Zen. That's quite right, Serge.
Yeah, zeitgeist.
Yeah.
Intellect would never paint. Now this sounds like you're a very intelligent person, but have you used working methods for writing songs, etc., where you consciously sort of try to be an idiot savant or an anti-intellectual?
Good spotting, Serge. That's exactly why one does use processes of deconstruction, is to deconstruct the intellect. That when you start to perceive a thread of rationality or stability in what you're doing, I think the impulse is to destroy that because you kind of know the outcome. And when you can predict the outcome of your own work, I think that's incredibly dissatisfying. Embraced by a certain sense of exhilaration by the fact that I don't quite know what I'm doing.
Little wonder then, little wonder, you little wonder you.
And when I start to see it make a pattern that I know where that pattern goes, I often try and break it down. Use another technique to destroy that.
Which on these last two albums was a moment where you realized that and went consciously the other way?
Let me see now. I didn't have the problem on Earthling so much. Everything was done in such a rush of spontaneity that no real patterns were emerging whilst we made the album. It, as a cohesive unit, had a pattern at the end after we'd formed everything together. It had substance, and obviously there was an unconscious thread of energy that ran through everything, that bound it together, and that was a good thing. But during the process of making it, no real patterns emerged. So I think that's what kept its sense of delight in itself, that it kept being amazed by itself, like what it was doing. Outside was slightly different, and I tell you what, I think if Outside had been released a lot earlier, outside had the disadvantage we couldn't find a record company, remember, in America to release it. So because everybody hated it. They said it was just too far out, too whatever, you know. And I think we kept tinkering with it because we had nothing else to do. Once we waited for a record company to come along and say, well, we'll give it a chance. And I now wish that we'd been able to stop when we stopped recording and not been given all that amount of time to sit around and ponder it and say, oh, let's go back and look at track 3, you know, and you sort of do a bit more on it. And I think, unfortunately, I felt that overall it became overworked by the end. Listening back to some of the earlier tapes of it, it sort of had a more Spartan kind of muscularity to it in its initial stages that I think is far preferable. But, you know, you can't beat them, mate. You have to, these big bloody companies, you know, what do you do, you know?
Oh, but BMG is so nice.
I tell you, they snapped it up.
I wondered, as we're talking about Earthling and Outside and all the, you know, the drum and bass, the new technologies and all of that.
Yeah.
I wonder, had they been around, all this new stuff, in 1972, do you think that you'd started off doing that, or do you think that the whole basic rock and roll, Ziggy, etc. approach was a necessary stepping stones leading up to this?
I think I would have embraced more of the technology had it been there, but it still would have been character driven. It would have been narration, and it would have been trying to create a narrative piece of work. I don't think inherently it would have changed that aspects of it. I think I would have tried and stylize Ziggy's World maybe a little more in that industrial sense had it been around. I think things like 5 Years, for instance, I think I would have just run for the drum machine had it been there at the time, because it would have been so perfect for that kind of robotic kind of death pound that I wanted with 5 Years, you know. But some of the other stuff was just strictly melodramatic and romantically inclined, straightforward 19th century stuff. You know? It's the thing that really sort of completes me as a person. I need the alternative universe of art, whatever it is. It helps me find my balance in the way that I live. I need it passionately.
You're very good friends with both Lou Reed and Iggy Pop, and all the Survivor stuff that we could bring up and which I won't. There's one thing I really wonder about. Are there moments now that you sort of ponder the mere fact of both creatively and as a human being, having survived all of that and being able to do creatively what you do now, that you have a sort of like, whew.
The only way that I explained it to somebody before like this, but the only way that I can explain all that is that it's kind of like, I don't reject the fact that I took a lot of drugs and had some very wild experiences.
You took drugs?
Well, mainly, you know, aspirins, Advils, that sort of thing, but in vast quantities, incredible quantities. I used to crush them up and stick them on my arm, and nothing happened. But it was almost like the abandonment of one's life in terms of the to be recompensated by an experience. You know, sort of you're kind of willing to put virtual reality on the line. And it was a bit like taking the shuttle, you know.
Space boy, you're sleeping now. Your silhouette is so stationary.
It was sort of, well, this thing could blow up, but if we get up out there, it could be really exhilarating, and let's see if we can come back and land. And when you get off the craft, you think, oh, that was great, but I wouldn't do it again. And it's kind of it feels a bit like that, you know. I'm glad I did it. I really am. I've got no, you know, I have no regrets, Serge. I don't really think of life in terms of regrets and things like that. I just kind of look at it as a series of quite extraordinary experiences.
Weren't you surprised then when George Martin asked John Lennon in I don't know, 1975 or something, if you could change one thing about the Beatles recordings, what would it be? And John Lennon said everything. That's sort of like, or is that just a bon mot? No, but that's the opposite of what you're...
I can't believe John really meant that, you know. I think it was a bon mot. I mean, there's somebody who, what I appreciate, he was so great with one-liners. I mean, and he just threw them out without thinking, you know, a lot. I think you do, you know, you see something coming, you can't avoid it. So, oh, there's a great line here somewhere. And you throw out these daft answers, and he would do that all the time. And I think there might have been a soupçon of truth about that, maybe, you know, but I'm sure not everything. I mean, he used to talk about the older material with me with such a kind of real sentimentality in a way, and he knew that they'd done really groovy things, you know. I mean, I don't think there's very much he would have changed about it. I can't second guess him. I can't say what he really felt, but he seemed to really like what he'd done in the past. I guess there's always those like real thorns in the side that he wished they'd never done that song or done it a different way and all that. I think that's dependent on whether we get it finished or not. I think we all have the ambition to try and get it together to do this thing. Unfortunately, they probably couldn't have picked three of the... I mean, all three of us are obsessively... We have very strong work ethics, and we're never ever in the same city at the same time. For the last year, it's been a real problem to get three of us sitting down at one table. Wilson is all over Europe. I mean, he's got an opera a weekend, that guy. I don't think, you know, there's nowhere where he isn't putting on an opera. And Brian's just gone to Russia, and I'm just going out on tour, so like it's like, I don't know, let's try next January, find a table to sit down at. But yeah, I'd love to get that done, I really would. The other thing that I think is easier to pin down, because Philip Glass doesn't move about quite as much as everybody else, is that Philip has asked me to write the third symphony with him after the Low End Heroes ones. He wants me to actually create a new one with him, which I think I'm quite excited about doing. I'm not quite sure what it means at the moment, writing with Philip, but I'm looking very much forward to doing that.
Wonderful, but so vulnerable. Don't you feel naked or exposed in a way when that is?
Oh, the moment you step into a public arena, you better be prepared for that, I think. Anybody who feels that they can retain the normality of a regular social animal if they become a public figure is fooling themselves.
But I find those naked demos more courageous than not playing your old hits anymore. Do you know
yeah,
what I
mean? I don't think there's anything courageous about not playing old hits. I just think, yes, you know, it could be perceived as foolhardy, you know, but that's fine. But for me, it's actually a necessity, or has been, for the. It was a necessity for the first 5 years of the 90s for me to do that. I think now I'm getting to a point where I can reevaluate them a bit more, and I'm very likely to now go back on my word and start playing them in a year or two. But so not this year yet. But when I can, it was important for me to be not used to them, for me to not know them so well, for me to be able to look back at them and say, well, that could be quite interesting, actually. To recontextualize it, to revamp it, to contemporize it, to put it in a different kind of context. So we'll see what the future brings on those.
67 or something, defending long hair,
yeah,
which was wonderful. Now, I'm sure there must have been a moment...
I defend it to this day.
Thank you. There must have been a moment with Joe growing up where you had you must have had a sort of situation where he was a punker with green hair or whatever,
Yeah.
and that you were put in that position, sort of.
Yeah.
No? Generation gap type of.
Well, you know, it was never for me. I mean, I wouldn't have cared when he was younger. I mean, he's his own man now, obviously, as he is your age. But there was a point where I worried for him. You know, that there was a point where he got a mohawk, you know, and it wasn't so much me that I mean, I'd go around with him whatever he looked like, you know. It's just that I know what gets thrown at you when you look different, you know, and maybe it was protective. But we never ever, I mean, I frankly, I just ended up keeping my mouth shut, you know, and I just thought, oh, look, he's going to go through it, he's going to have to go through it, you know, he'll decide. But so he's always done he's always been what he wants to be.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
No, my pleasure. I assure you.